Hi there, this is Chris from MoneyHub, and this video looks at how to request a credit card chargeback. We've put this guide together because there's a lot of people out there who have the same question. There's been some dispute with the merchant, so we're not talking about fraud. We're talking about, oh, I paid for something and I didn't like the result of it. I got something shipped, I got a subscription that I didn't need, and now I can't get a refund. And they should be giving me a refund, and basically all questions like that. So this guide comprehensively goes through exactly what you need to know, and I'll put a link in the video down below so you can actually go directly to it. I'm just going to go through some of the highlights, some of the finer points just that you can be aware of should you be wanting to progress a recharge. Just as a background, you do have the right to do this. The banks, arguably, they're not the best at customer support for this. There's no money in it for them, and it takes some time sort of going back between you and them and then their credit card partner, which is either going to be Visa or MasterCard. But generally, you just have to follow the process and make sure that you've got everything that you need to really push for this, because there's a lot of merchants out there that will not really help you, should something go wrong, especially if they're from overseas and you really have no rights. And then it's just the charge sits on your credit card bill and you have to either pay it or fight it. And so thanks for coming to this guide to have a look, or thanks for watching this video so you can kind of like get a general sort of understanding. This is specific to New Zealand consumer law. It's not for overseas, but because your card, it's issued in New Zealand by a New Zealand bank or an issuer, then it most certainly applies to overseas purchases, because that's where you're paying, the bill within New Zealand, and it's being charged in New Zealand dollars on your statement. So without further ado, I'm just going to say we don't cover fraud. If you do have any fraud on your credit card, then please go directly to your issuer, so your bank, and say that you have fraud, and they will, sort that out for you. This is exclusively for, debit and credit cards that are New Zealand registered, and it's not going to apply to foreign registered cards. This is presented in good faith. I just want to say that it's a complicated area, and we can't really give, or we actually will not give any customized or specific advice should you write in. Of course, you're welcome to leave a comment below, but we can't assess cases. We can't give any kind of guidance, financial or procedural or anything similar. We just want you to kind of know your rights and know exactly what you're in store for should you go down the road of a chargeback. So usually this happens, like a chargeback will usually happen in one of a few ways. So you buy something, usually online, and what you buy online never shows up. So, and then you contact, the merchant, it's like, where's my stuff? When's it coming? And then you're ignored. That's pretty much a really common one. Some things are like, oh, I've prepaid some travel costs, and then the airline cancels the flight or the hotel closes down, but you're offered a credit and it's very difficult, and you're not offered a refund. That, we would argue, falls under the chargeback framework. And then if you purchase something and then unknowingly and very unreasonably have your card charged later as some sort of subscription, that seems to be a scam going around. But it's not a fraud. It's more of a deceptive method to get your card details, provide you, say, something maybe for $10, $15, and then maybe a month later, charge you $500 because you didn't read the terms and conditions of buying the thing for $10. So there's little tricks there that some people, usually overseas, try to get away with, and that can give rise to a chargeback as well. And then also other issues is merchant promises to refund you. So you buy something, you're promised a refund, and that refund never happens. You never get your card refunded, and you have to chase. And then you buy something from a company that goes bankrupt. And a recent example of there is STA Travel. So that was, 3 years ago in 2020. But, the issue was a whole bunch of people paid for travel, and then the travel agency goes under, and there's no protection for them. And so basically what happened to the money? Well, if you'd paid for it with your card, then you could claim a chargeback or certainly go down the procedure of that. So if your situation is something similar to any of the above examples, then a chargeback is most likely going to be the way to get your money back. There's very little other options because, all you have is the card that you paid it with, and, you have no other kind of, abilities to demand the money. So does your transaction qualify for a chargeback? Usually it has to fit, one of these. So you paid for something that you didn't receive, you canceled something recurring, but they kept charging you, and also the service or product that you received was damaged, defective, or not at all described, and that you received something that was counterfeit, or that it was, you were misled about the terms of the sale, and or you were promised a refund, but you never received it. And then sort of two other options here are basically your goods were cancelled and then they failed to refund you after you asked, and then you tried to withdraw money from your credit card and it was deducted, but the machine didn't give it to you. Now that is a big fear with people traveling. Certainly, it's not that common, but that would give rights to a chargeback as well. But in this case, you'd be putting that forward pretty quickly because it's just you and the bank. There's no third party, but that's just something to be aware of some of the options. Now, there are also time limits, and we asked people from the banking ombudsman, and they helped us put together this guide. So this information comes from them, and it's really saying that it's about 90 days to 120 days. And for services, you can go back, for flights and stuff, you can go back 12 months. And then, 180 days really applies to refunds promised and not received. So just have a look through this in detail. And I've linked, as I said, to the guide below. I just, it's all things to all people, but we just need to make sure that you are covered by it. So chargeback on EFTPOS and debit cards, what you need to know. So outside of credit cards, you still have rights. The first question is, though, can I charge back on an EFTPOS transaction? So the answer to that is no. If you paid with EFTPOS, then there's no chargebacks because you're not covered by MasterCard or Visa's processing systems, which would be for a debit card, and EFTPOS uses a completely different exchange. So that's just worth noting that you don't have those kind of rights. Can I charge back on a debit card transaction, i.e. using your debit bank card, MasterCard or Visa? It really does depend, and this is where things get a little bit interesting. So the guidance that we've received is that if you inserted or swiped your debit card at the payment terminal, then it would go through EFTPOS and can't be charged back. But if you paid with a debit card online or over the phone or in person using contactless, that's not EFTPOS, then it's going to go through MasterCard or Visa's exchange, and then it's going to be eligible for a chargeback. We find this quite incredible that's the distinction, but that is what the kind of a regulatory framework sort of seems to be. So we are just reporting that, and your bank may have a different view, and it may be able to provide further information. That is the information that we had or have, and we continue to update the guide. This guide, when it's needed or when things change. So how do I check if my debit card transaction went through a Visa, MasterCard, or EFTPOS? So to help this question, we asked an expert, and then you can see from the ANZ have their own process, ASB or KiwiBank. You need to call them. At the BNZ, you also need to call them, whereas the ANZ, you can see it on the app, and Westpac is going to show you it on the printed statement. And then other banks, so the Taranaki Savings Bank, Southern Building Society, Cooperative, etc., then just call the bank and ask them. Now, as I said, if you paid with a credit card, then don't worry. That doesn't go through the EFTPOS system. That goes through the Visa or MasterCard exchange. So then you are protected there. So general requirements to initiate a chargeback. You can't just go straight to the bank and say, right, I've fallen out with the merchant, or I don't like this thing, I need a chargeback. You've got to go through the process, and you have to have the evidence. So first of all, you've got to get in contact with the people that you bought something from, and you have to make it clear that you want your money back. And if you've done this over the phone, you've got to also follow it up with something in writing. And chargebacks are a real nuisance for merchants, so it is fair that, they get the right to try and resolve the situation first before the bank, gets involved, or before Visa or MasterCard get involved. So you do have to make waves and, follow the process, get the emails, get the evidence, and just present to the bank that you've made, enough effort to try and get this sorted. And then second to that, you have to gather the evidence which you need. So the first thing is going to be your proof of purchase, and that's really important. So that can be, the delivery slip. It can be, exactly what you bought, the confirmation emails that you received if you bought something online. And then, of course, it's step one again, the proof that you asked for a writing and refund. So you can screenshot anything there or use the email. And then evidence that supports your claim. So basically that you need to explain exactly why you're getting or want the chargeback or want your money back, because it's not going to be so obvious to someone assessing this, as to why. So you need to explain, with evidence, what's gone wrong to warrant this chargeback. And then you may need to supply terms and conditions that you agreed to at the time of purchase. At the same time, they have to be reasonable, and they certainly can't override the Visa and MasterCard chargeback rules. So it's just worth noting that you'll need to gather evidence there, as I said. And then here, you do need to write your story and explain exactly what's gone on beyond the evidence that you've gathered. So you could say, for example, if there was some tickets problem, I purchased tickets and the production was scheduled for this date, and then the ticket, issuer canceled the tickets, and I never got my money back. I never got to see the show, and I was promised the refund, and then nothing happened. And then I kept on being promised, and basically, I'm now disputing this because I didn't receive anything. They've gone to ground and they're not responding, so I want to charge back. And that is pretty much the situation. And then you submit your case, and depending on the bank that you're with, you'll need to work it out what their process is. But I would strongly suggest that people read this guide in detail around the submission process, just in case if we are updating, which we continue to do, and these guides continue to grow and be more useful. If we do have any further information or tips, we will put that there. So beyond this video, please look at the guide, because that's the most live version of everything. Now, next steps to organize a chargeback. You need to look at your bank, and if you click out, you'll be able to see what they do and what their process is. And it does take some time for the banks to sort out, and so they're not making it so easy. And thus it really is on you to chase. Now, some frequently asked questions. I want to kind of just run through these, because you'll get a whole bunch of things told to you along the way of doing a chargeback. And I think it's good just to, be aware of what your rights are and what some of the tricks are. So if the retailer is telling you that they don't have enough money to refund you, is that going to affect the chargeback success? And the answer is no, because the chargeback is processed from the bank or the card issuer. It's not the retailer. So you'll get your money back on your card. It doesn't necessarily have to come from the retailer. It's up for the people who transacted your charge, i.e. Visa, MasterCard, or your bank, to, make right there. So just, if you do hear that, it's probably just an idea to ignore it, because you're not requesting the chargeback directly from the retailer. It's coming now to the card issuer that you bank with or that you have your credit card with. A second thing here is, if the merchant has gone into liquidation or is bankrupt now, can I still request the chargeback? And the answer is yes, because you're within the time. I mean, if you're within the time limits, then certainly. Just because something goes bust, it does not mean that you can't claim on that. That's the whole point of a chargeback, to give you that option, because as I said with the other point, it's for the banks to sort out with their partners. And there is some expert guidance there, which I'll leave you to have a read through should you want to. Now, if the merchant is overseas and their transaction is in a foreign currency, can I still request a chargeback? Yes, because it's exactly the same if you bought it in New Zealand or if you bought it overseas. Your rights still apply. It's the card that matters because that's issued in New Zealand. So just be aware that if you are trying to be fobbed off or it seems difficult because it's some overseas retailer, that's fine. Then you just take the evidence and you take it to the bank. Now, I returned goods within the return period, but the refund wasn't processed, and now the retailer won't talk to me. Can I request a chargeback? So the answer to that is yes as well, because that is around the same thing as a missale or a not fit for purpose. Any of those things, damaged goods, etc. You have returned something, you have nothing, and now you don't have your money either. So yes, there's a chargeback claim there. Now, can I request a chargeback if I no longer want the item I purchased because I've basically changed my mind? So the answer to that is no, because a change of mind does not give the right to do a chargeback. Otherwise, there'd be a whole bunch of retailers that wouldn't really know how to make any money because people change their mind all the time, and that could affect their businesses. Actually, it very much certainly would. So you can't charge back for all sort of similar reasons. You're not happy with the quality of the good, and it still functions, but you're just like a little bit disappointed. You found a better price somewhere and now you want to get rid of what you bought and get it from somewhere else and cancel the order. You didn't cancel something that was renewing, which has been charged despite several reminders about that. And then you have issues due to the sort of billing. You need to contact, who you deal with and kind of work these issues out. It's certainly not a chargeback type scenario because these are just contractual, difficulties or points of view, and you'll want to, sort of get out of these charges, but it's not going to be from a chargeback. You just need to, just like anything that you sign up to, or anything that you pay for, there's a way to do it properly. And a chargeback is not the answer. Now, if you have a contract with the merchant and the chargeback relates to a dispute, you must deal with the company directly, to resolve the issues. So that's really important that you just stick with the company and make sure you're. And there's some further points there which you can have a read through. And which credit card is best for chargebacks and what's the worst. So basically we've heard, and of course we have no evidence from this, that people who deal with American Express tend to have a better experience in the fact that you have no other parties to deal with. So like with you, and if you're an American Express card holder, it's not like if you're an ANZ customer and you have a Visa card, then you talk to the ANZ, who talks to Visa, who comes back to the ANZ, who talks to you. If you have an Amex card, like American Express, then you are directly with American Express. So that is one thing to keep in mind. And, it's a similar situation, beyond the banks with things like Latitude and, the GEM Visa, Q MasterCard, that, if you are dealing with those type of cards, then you will be, talking to first the issuer, which is going to be GEM or Q, and then they'll be talking to their card partner. So just keep in mind that, these things are not so straightforward, but there's certainly no best card. But, what we hear is that people are pro Amex in the fact for a chargeback, but it's not something that, there's a science for, or there's certainly not a top 5 list of cards. It's just really coming down to what the support is offered by the bank that you bank with, because that will be the biggest driver of how responsive the whole claim becomes. Now, what happens if my card issuer bank rejects the chargeback request? So this is a really kind of unfortunate situation. Sometimes this does happen just because there's a lack of information. It seems too difficult, and basically they cut you loose. You can complain to the banking ombudsman, but you need to read their chargeback guidelines, and that we've linked to here. So you can go through that and have a careful read, because it's really important that you do know kind of what's happening, so that you can make an informed decision about how you proceed. We've got a case here where somebody signed up for something small and then got something a very large bill, and the timeframes are outlined here in the scheme's summary. So we suggest having a read through that, because that is quite useful. So that's the guide, and that's the video. If you have any questions, please let us know in the comments below. As I said at the start of the video, we can't comment on individual cases, just because that's too much of a risk variable, and there's no procedure, or there's no sort of standard advice that we can give either. So we've put the information in good faith so that people can properly assess their needs and look at the options for them and understand it. And we've linked out to the banking ombudsman for further information. Should you not get very far, you are absolutely welcome to make a complaint to them and raise your case there. But we just want you to kind of work through it, see what's available, and make sure you have all the evidence to proceed properly. And keep chasing the bank if you don't hear back from them. So thanks very much. We want the guides to be as comprehensive as possible. So do leave a comment, and do feel free to write into us on our email, because we will respond. And we want to improve the information that we present. And often people who actually look at our stuff help us to do that. So thank you very much. And I wish you the best of luck with your chargeback case.